Live. First of all, if you're watching the replay of this, then ignore all the weirdness that is because this is live. But if you're going to join me live, that's terrific. If at any point you are watching this and I don't realize you're in the room, then my apologies. This is my first attempt at live streaming something, so we're just going to give it a shot here. Right here at the top, I got to say I am visually impaired, and so it seems odd to be talking to the camera when nobody's watching. But anyway, so I am visually impaired, so it takes me a little longer to do some things. So that's why it might be like, what's he doing? Why is he roaming around the screen and not paying attention to the camera? So anyway, that's what that's all about. So we're going to give that a shot. Like I said, if I do look down or look to the side or whatever, I'm just trying to check out the screen and see what's going on. So that's that. All right, so tonight is Wednesday, September 21st? No, is that right? Yeah, September 21st. September 21st, 2016, and Star Wars Rebels Season 3 comes out on Saturday, the 24th at 8:30 on Disney XD or in the app or whatever you got. So that's coming out this Saturday, and we're just going to talk a little bit about it. If I get lost midstream or whatever, then just ignore that and keep on watching. So Star Wars Rebels, what do we have as far as what we had to look forward to? Well, we obviously have to recap everything, and there's been tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of recap done on this. People doing videos and podcasts and recapping the whole thing. I listened to a podcast called Star Wars 7 by 7, which you should totally check out. And I will put the link to that in the chat box if I can do that. Let's see here. Yes. Okay, so that is in the chat box. That's the best way I know how to get to it. So anyway, that is, like I said, the podcast called Star Wars 7 by 7. It's a daily Star Wars podcast. And so I actually did an interview or conversation with the host. His name's Alan Voivod, and did a conversation with him recently. Great guy, knows a lot about Star Wars, and does that podcast. And he's doing a whole week this week about different recapping of Star Wars Rebels. So he's doing like season, like the season finale, and he's doing the season like new scenes that have been coming out. He did an overview of the trailer. He's doing things all week on his podcast. So if you get a chance, go to sw7x7.com and check that out, because he's got a lot of great stuff. There's also another video, another YouTuber. It's Star Wars Explained, and I subscribe to him as well. And I don't have a link to that. I guess I should. Better prepare for these live things, I guess. So, but it's called Star Wars Explained, and he does a daily video as well. When he did a recap, I think, of like Star Wars Rebels in 3 minutes or something of that nature. So much better than I could do. All that being said, Star Wars Rebels, you got to do a recap, a little bit of information. So what the heck is that? If you've never seen Star Wars Rebels, then you're missing out, because it's a great show, and it's all about a band of rebels. It's about a group of rebels that are working against the Empire. And this takes place in the timeline about, I think, 5 years before A New Hope, something like that. There is a young Princess Leia in it at one point, which would make her about 14, 15 years old, something of that nature, depending on how quickly they're moving the timeline along. But it takes, like I said, it takes place about 5 years before A New Hope. And it's about this group of rebels that we've never met, and there is Kanan, who is a Jedi, who was a Padawan, and his master was killed during Order 66, and so he didn't ever achieve the rank of Jedi Knight, but he is a Jedi. He's a surviving Jedi. And then you have different people. You have Hera, Syndulla, who is from Ryloth, and her dad is Cham Syndulla. And then you have Zeb, and he is a something. I'm sure if somebody's watching this, they're probably telling me what he is, screaming at the camera. But I'll have to look that up. But then you have Sabine, who is Mandalorian. I love the Mandalorians. They're one of my favorite, I don't know, favorite groups of people because, like with the Clone Wars, really brought them out. And of course, Duchess Satine. If you've ever seen the Clone Wars, Duchess Satine was Duchess of Mandalore, and she and Obi-Wan had a thing, and I love Obi-Wan, so there you go. So she's meant Sabine. Back to the Rebels. Sabine's Mandalorian, and then at the beginning of the series, they pick up Ezra, who actually is Force sensitive and ends up starting to be trained by Kanan. And so they go through that whole thing. And at the end of season 1, spoiler alert, and by the way, if you've not seen Rebels, don't watch this. Just stop watching right now. Whether it's live or replay, just stop watching, because it's gonna get ruined. If you haven't seen it, binge watch, in the next 2 days. But so they pick up Ezra, and at the end of season 1, then we see that they've had this informant, and we find out that informant is Ahsoka Tano. And of course, if you've seen the Clone Wars, Ahsoka was Anakin Skywalker's apprentice, who ended up leaving the Jedi Order because of a whole big mess and blah, blah, blah. So we found out there's Ahsoka. So Ahsoka makes her return, which I love the character of Ahsoka. Like, I hope she gets to make a movie debut someday. Like, that's my hope, because Ahsoka's fantastic. She's a great character. I think a lot of people didn't like her at first. I don't know what necessarily the deal was. Other people could probably tell me, but the idea probably was like, who the heck is this? And we're going to shove her in there. Because my first thought was like, we don't see her in any movie. There's no discussion of her. And all of a sudden, she's supposed to play this big role in Anakin's life. And even in episode 3, we don't see Anakin discuss Ahsoka or anything like that. Obviously, that character was developed after the movies were made. But nonetheless, it's kind of like, how am I supposed to get into this? But after watching it for a while, I mean, Ahsoka's fantastic. She's a great character, and I really, really enjoy her. So she is getting a novel that's coming out, I believe, in October, and she was in the last episode of season 1, and of course has her big moments in season 2. So there's a lot of things that happen in Rebel season 1 and 2, and we're not going to, again, if you want to recap, there's tons of stuff out there. Go to sw7x7.com. He's got some good stuff. But or go to starwars.com, and they're recapping things, and they're showing new scenes from season 3 and so forth. But it's a great, great series. And there's just big moments. We see Yoda at one point. We see Bail Organa. We see a lot of, Captain Rex from the clones. We see a lot of great familiar characters. Even Hondo Anaka, who is from the Clone Wars and is the pirate or whatever, we see him, and of course they've all changed because it's been a few years or whatever, but it's just a great series. And so throughout it we see like the evolution of Ezra and Kanan's relationship, because Ezra's being trained by Kanan, as Kanan's his master and Ezra's the apprentice, which there was a scene where they were in a temple, because on Lothal, where the whole thing takes place, it's the planet of Lothal, there is a temple, and you access it through the Force. And they've been there a couple of times, and one of the times Kanan got sort of knighted by what was the Grand Inquisitor, and which was very interesting. So after he got knighted, that was a very interesting scene. But throughout it, he had been Ezra's master, and I think it's just an interesting dynamic between Ezra and Kanan, because Kanan was a Padawan whenever Order 66 took place and never achieved the rank of knight. And then, of course, Ezra really has no idea about his powers, about his Force abilities, and Kanan's teaching him those things. So the idea of both Kanan and Ezra's relationship, of both of them together, I think is really interesting. So what are we going to see in season 3? Well, obviously we have Admiral Grand Admiral Thrawn, which if you're unfamiliar with Star Wars and the expanded universe, which I'm pretty much unfamiliar with, I've only read about this, but there was a trilogy of books that came out, I believe, starting in like 91, and it's affectionately known as the Thrawn trilogy. I think it was like Heir to the Empire and a couple of others. And basically, it was the time after, I think it was after Return of the Jedi and that time period and so forth. I've not read the books. I don't know anything about them. Deep Star Wars fans have a much better idea. But Grand Admiral Thrawn was a very, very popular character. And so he's now become canon, which if you're not sure about what that canon means, I do have a podcast episode about that. You can go to projectpadawan.com/1, and that'll talk about the canon. But with him becoming canon, it's a huge thing for Star Wars fans because he was so crucial in those expanded universe books, which the expanded universe now is called Legends, and it's a whole big thing. So we will see Grand Admiral Thrawn, who seems to be very diabolical just in the little scenes we've seen. And of course, we're going to get Darth Maul. He has returned at the end of season 2. Darth Maul's like the guy who just won't die, like he's like gets whacked in half and then he's like, I'm back. I got some spider legs, but I'm back. And then, Sidious uses him. He gets him towards the end of the Clone Wars, and there's a comic book series about it. And now he's back. He's older, not quite the assassin he was, but he's back and ready to, I think, try to get Ezra as his apprentice and everything. So, it should be an interesting dynamic there with Darth Maul. I like Darth Maul. I think he's an interesting character. He's not necessarily my favorite character. If you want to know my favorite character, I'll tell you since this is a special one. But my favorite character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I did a video about today on the channel, so you can check that out. But I do like Darth Maul. And I think he's an interesting character because I think when The Phantom Menace came out, it was kind of like this idea that he was going to be the next Darth Vader. It's like, oh, here's Darth Vader, and here's the next Luke Skywalker, and here's the next, even with The Force Awakens, we've done that, like Rey's the next Luke, and Poe's the next Han, and, that sort of thing. And then Kylo Ren's the next Darth Vader. And it's like, I think that's what happened to Darth Maul was, it's like, oh, he's the next Darth Vader. And then he gets whacked in half, and it's like, oh, he's not the next Darth Vader. Who on him, or whatever. So he was never intended to be the next Darth Vader, I don't think, at least not in my mind. Like I didn't, maybe as when I was younger, I viewed him as the next Darth Vader. I was like, oh, he's probably going to be the next Darth Vader, yay! But he's not. I mean, Darth Vader is, in and of himself, Darth Vader. Darth Maul is a completely different character with a completely different background. A completely different origin story, a completely different way he got to be a Sith and all this sort of thing. So Darth Maul is a completely different character, which I like the character a lot. I think he's a really intriguing character, and I'll be interested to see what they do with him here in Star Wars Rebels Season 3. Maybe he'll die in Star Wars Rebels. I don't know. Maybe he'll be that character that just never dies. Like he just rides off into the sunset and he just never dies. Which, I guess is good or bad. Who really knows? So that's kind of thing. But I like him. So we're going to see a lot of him. And then from the scenes that we've seen, it looks like Ezra and Kanan. Kanan was blinded at the end of season 2. And so that plays out. Ezra, it looks like he's cut his hair. And so he's got that Sith holocron. I think is probably changing him a bit. And so there's a lot of that dynamic. And then we saw the scene with the Bendu. And I don't know what the heck that's all about, but that seems really intriguing as well. So there's just a ton of stuff going to happen in season 3. And I'm really interested to see how, if they bring back any of the familiar characters, how they play into the whole world of Star Wars, since we're coming up on Rogue One, which I think may end up playing into this, because this isn't the exact time period of Rogue One. I mean, people are like, yeah, it is. It's before New Hope. It's a couple of years or a few years before what Rogue One would be, I think. Now, I could be wrong. This could be the exact time frame, and like the Rogue One characters are just around the corner, and we just are going to turn and see them like, oh, there she is, So who really knows? But with Rogue One coming and with, the different things like that with comics and all the things coming out right now with the canon, this is a great time, especially for Star Wars Rebels, because they can do a lot with this whole season. So it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. So I'm excited about it. Looking at the viewers here, I see we have exactly 0 at this time. So if you're watching the replay right now, I've literally been talking to you, the person watching the replay, because at this whole point I've had no viewers, which is perfectly fine. This is just a test. It's not like I have a huge, massive audience to tune in and watch me ramble on about Star Wars Rebels or whatever, though I certainly could ramble on for days and days and days. I'm just going to take a quick, short little break here, kind of let my voice rest for a second, just watch. So if you're watching the replay, this will be boring. I apologize. But just kind of watch this for just a second. All right, well, that's really all I had. I just wanted to see if I can get a discussion going for Star Wars Rebels, but so far, no viewers at this point. So we'll try this again another day, try to get, live streaming, just have a grand old discussion and have a good time. So anyway, if you've watched this replay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Check the description box for links to the website where you can subscribe to my podcast, which is called, of course, Project Padawan. It is a Star Wars fan podcast for the beginner, the learner, the Padawan in us all. Every Friday, I release an episode called A Training Session, where we tackle another topic from Star Wars. This week, coming out on Friday, we'll be talking about the Hutts, beyond just Jabba the Hutt. And then coming up next week, I just recorded today, we'll be talking about the Death Star. So a couple of upcoming things. And of course, in a couple of weeks, I will be releasing another bonus episode, which I affectionately call Bonusodes. And on that bonusode, I will have my conversation with Alan Voivod from Star Wars 7x7, which is a fantastic podcast that you should definitely check out. Just go to sw7x7.com, and it's great. So check the links in the description box. Go to the website, subscribe to the podcast, find me on social media, all that good stuff. And again, if you watch this replay, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And may the Force be with you.